It's great to see such a crowd here this morning. My name is Tommy Heffernan. I'm a vet. I'm conscious that you've given me your most valuable resource today, which is your time. So I'm hoping that I'm going to provide a bit of value. And it's fantastic to see a big crowd. It's also a little bit daunting to look out and see so many heads. So I'm going to follow a bit of a program today. But first of all, I have to really start off by thanking John, Maura, and all the team in Gurteen for having us here. These events don't just happen by accident. The team in Precision and our team in Intrachem as well, our distributors, have been a huge factor in helping us get these events off the ground. We're also very lucky to have FBD, Cormac Tagging and JFC as sponsors. So 3 Irish companies that are doing a wonderful job, and we'll hear from them as we go out through the day. So I'm going to talk about calf health, and I mentioned that time is your most precious resource. So when we think about healthy calves, it really is, we think about sick and diseased calves. The challenge is always going to be the time, the welfare, and all those sort of things. But one of the things that I had learned, I suppose, from doing these events was that it's about progress. So there's no perfection in this world. And I started these events the last day in Cork, and I thought I was going to be able to go through the whole event and keep everything in my head. And I discovered I wasn't. So progress over perfection. I live by this rule myself. So I'm going to follow these notes today to try and keep me on track. And I see a member in the audience there. I'm thinking now of all these people here talking. I started doing farmer presentations with a good friend of mine, Charles Chavas, down there in the audience about 12 years ago. And I started my career talking in front of farmers by turning my back for half an hour and pointing up at a PowerPoint. So I've made a lot of progress since then, but again, progress is a really important thing to me. And when it comes to calf health and stuff I'm talking about today, it's not about doing everything perfectly, but maybe you'll take 1 or 2 things that you might be able to take home with you that you'll be able to use in your own farms. So when we think about calf health, it's a bit like links in the chain. So when I started thinking about this as a vet, I started off trying to find the vein in the calf. That was my first challenge. Then I was trying to treat sick animals, and then I was trying to prevent disease. And I suppose as my career went on, my job is kind of my hobby as well. I'm a bit one of those type of characters. I'm always thinking about how you can make things better. So I started looking at calves and realizing that there's no silver bullets, and it's all like links in a chain. So from the dry cow all the way up to weaning, there's all these little steps that we need to take. And that's important because I started breaking down what I consider really good habits for calf rearing. So it's a different way. I'm not a traditional thinker, but when we look at the habits, what are the successful habits for calf rearing? And when we look at calves, we're investing in the future of our farm, particularly in dairy farms. But I met a man inside in the bathroom there earlier on with a good chat. He was going rearing calves. So the rules apply to rearing calves as well. And if I look at what we do with calves has a huge impact on the future of your farm, okay? So we'll cover a bit of that. And again, one of the things I've talked about in these events is calf welfare. And I get a little bit frustrated with the calf welfare story because it's been almost removed from farm, and it's like a stick that people constantly go back and beat the industry with. But I want to make a very, very strong point about calf welfare today. You should own calf welfare. That's your story. And really making the link between good calf welfare and good health and performance. The two are completely linked in together. I talk about happy calves, and I'll make a bit more sense of that later on. So when I was trying to put this idea together, I said, right, I've come a long way since the PowerPoint and turning my back. And when I turned around, half the audience were asleep. Now I've got things that I throw at people if they fall asleep, so don't fall asleep today. I had said, how am I going to try and bring this story to life? How am I going to make sense of kind of a complicated subject? And I started thinking about, well, most disease is about a balancing act. So it's a balancing act between what I call health and immunity. So here's my seesaw, which was massively upgraded from the first time we did this. I had a little timber wooden thing that I made myself. And again, that's all about progress, working with smarter people than myself. So I'm going to go back to this the whole time today. I'm going to tell a story about immunity and infection pressure. So these are my pathogens, this is infection pressure, so I'll be the seesaw here. We're trying to balance, we're trying to drive up immunity, and we're trying to drive down infection pressure. So infection pressure, these are my bugs in case anyone didn't know, is the amount of pathogens we're exposed to. And our immune system plays a central role in the calf. And as we go through this, I'll explain why the calf is different. Much of the stuff you've heard it a million times before, but it's an important concept. It's often not new knowledge we want, it's reminding of the old stuff that's really key. So I'm going to go back to this the whole time. So I want you to finish up to be thinking about how we can drive up immunity and how we can drive down infection pressure. And then, I shouldn't have called it my colon, I'll get a name for that, but my digestive tract here is to bring the story of gut health to life. And when we think about the immune system, why is 70% of the immune system in the gut? I thought I knew a little bit, but when I got involved in this project, new things started happening and I started learning new things. And if I make it back here, or if I'm back in 10 years, I'll probably have learned new stuff. So a very important role is that idea for all of us, progress over perfection, small changes over time. So applying small changes can make a big difference. So I'm going to look at this as a kind of building a story of calf health. So if we look at it like going back to the seesaw and we think about, well, I want to drive up immunity and I want to drive down infection pressure. The biggest thing, and I know you're all sick of hearing vets talking about colostrum, but Precision Microbes costs a few pounds. Colostrum is free, and it is the foundation of calf health. So I'm going to tell you some stuff you know today, you've heard too many times, and hopefully I'll tell you a few new things as well. So when we think about our cows and heifers in our farms, they're no different to ourselves. They're building an immune bank of knowledge. Immunity is like memory, so they're coming across infections. Their immune cells are responding by producing different antibodies. So the next time an infection comes, they're able to respond better. And we know that our calves are born without an immune system. Okay, so when we're born, we get our antibodies through the placenta from our mother. But a calf is different. They have to get their antibodies through colostrum or the first milk. So this is my udder for the day. So when we think about colostrum, we think about the udder. We've got to think about, well, why is colostrum different to normal milk? And the first place we start is we know there's more fat and protein. It's got twice the fat and protein of normal milk. And that's important because if I've got poor quality forage, that's going to influence the quality of the colostrum that goes into the calf. So all of you, it's a bit like it's good timing. There's one for everyone in the audience. Late Thai show's on tonight. I see a few kids in the audience. That in your buckets you'll have a refractometer. So we can measure colostrum quality on farm. There's a little device. Many of you are probably using them already. And we can look at colostrum quality on farm. And we can put in a sample of colostrum. We can measure the specific gravity of it. And that's a very useful tool. But what if I get a poor quality colostrum sample? What do? Or can I influence my cows now to ensure I have good colostrum quality? And you can by making sure that you know what's going into the cow, knowing what the forage is like, and supplementing where needed. So we really start with the quality piece in colostrum, and even managing our heifers. Don't underestimate the impact of stress on heifers and colostrum quality. The next thing when we think about our colostrum, that's a really important thing, and you've all heard this before, that we've done a good job with our cows and heifers. They're well fed, they're bagged up nicely. The colostrum is produced in the udder about 7 to 14 days before calving. We need to get the right quantities of colostrum into the calf and into the gut. So 3 to 4 litres. I think with the type of cow that John talked about here in the college, you're probably looking at that 4 litres as a minimum. But why do we want to get it in quickly? And this is an important point. So hopefully all these things will make sense. That when we go into the gut of the calf, and these antibodies I talked about, that the cow has produced or the heifers have produced, the gut is actually quite open. So it actually takes in these antibodies through a thing called pinocytosis. Some of these antibodies actually stick onto the surface. So when we vaccinate cows, we're trying to stimulate that immune system to produce antibodies. And so the problem with this is we have to get it in quickly. But it leads me to another point about colostrum that I've seen on farm as well. So the right quality, we want the right quantity, and we need to get it quickly in to get these antibodies to absorb. So people often ask me the question, Well, our farms are getting bigger, and should we tube or should we bottle? So when we think about antibody absorption, if we're stomach tubing the calf, the antibodies are still absorbed in, and if we bottle a calf, what I find is it may be easier to get the second feed of colostrum in. I was driving last week and I was listening to a podcast. Anyone who does a bit of driving, podcasts are a godsend. And in the middle of the podcast, there was an advertisement for bovine colostrum for human health. Because there's a real awakening that there's stuff in colostrum now that's actually not just beneficial for the calf, but humans. I think nature is amazing. So I suppose when we get colostrum in, they're the fundamentals. But there's one thing I started noticing on farm, because you've probably heard all that before, and it is that, remember, the gut's open, so we want to get it in quickly. And I remember I said colostrum at twice the fat and protein of normal milk. But that creates a problem, because someone else loves colostrum. And that is my purple pathogens here, my bugs, particularly our coliforms. They love that fatty, slimy layer the colostrum leaves on buckets, in dump buckets. And if we do everything, we've done a great job getting the right quality, the right quantity in, and quickly. What can happen is if we get colostrum on farm that's got bugs in it, we start tipping the scales the wrong way, because they get into the gut. And they also can do different things in there which are harmful. So one of the things I like little gadgets. So I like using little bits of technology, keep myself interested. And so I started going around using this little swabbing machine just to see. It gives you a very accurate reading on where bugs are and what the levels are. And the two areas that you constantly see a lot of infection pressure. Any guesses? You didn't think this would be questions and answers. Look of panic on some people's faces. The dump bucket and the stomach tube. The dump bucket and the stomach tube. So when we think about colostrum management, we've got to think about the dump bucket and how we clean it. And if we're storing colostrum on farm, think about our buckets. Because if it goes over 8 degrees, we've got these pathogens building up. And you put all this work into colostrum and how we handle it. The hygiene around colostrum is absolutely key. So I think that's probably one of the big learnings I have for people on colostrum. So I see more farms actually looking at using I see the fridge there, old fridges to store colostrum. And just maybe spending an extra little bit of time on thinking about, well, that bucket of bee stings has been there for 24 hours. You know, that's the level of detail. And I make no apologies. I apply the same rules to myself, that if I'm giving advice, I'm trying to always give the best advice. So I think how we handle colostrum, how we store it, is really, really key. So there's one other element to colostrum, and I think this is the real exciting part. Someone who likes biology and nature. I'm back to my udder here again. Everyone happy with my udder? You're with me on the udder? Okay, very good. I'm going to go with you. You're nodding. You're the one I want to focus on. Okay, so when we think about the digestive tract, there's other stuff in colostrum. And this doesn't cost any money, right? But there's prebiotics in it that actually help, as I'll talk about the gut in a while, that go in and help the development of the gut, that lead to better lifetime performance. There's a reason they're charging $9.99 for a bit of bovine colostrum in America, because of all the goodies that are in it that help develop the gut. So many of you will probably hear the baby ads on television. Most of you are producing milk that goes to the baby powder. And they talk about these oligosaccharides, these prebiotics. Colostrum is full of them. So really, when we think about calf health, it is the foundation of the calf health story. Now, I'm conscious there'll be questions as we go through this, and we're going to answer questions at the end. The beauty about having a big audience is people are always afraid to ask hard questions, so I get away quite lightly. So if you have a difficult question, you can ask me. But really, when we think about colostrum, it is the mainstay of the calf health story. So the next part of the calf health story is feeding. So when we think about colostrum, we've got to think about the next stage of milk feeding, which is transition milk. And it's not quite the same as colostrum, but it has more energy and protein in it. It's got a huge value. So the cow is amazing. She's got this colostrum, which she's transferring her antibodies to the calf, and she's designed a second milk and third milk, fourth milk, that's also helping with digestion. It's higher fat and protein. So utilize transition milk where you can. Where you're using vaccinations, a lot of times with vaccines, it's actually inside the transition milk that the antibodies are in. And again, a lot of them are just providing protection along the lining of the gut. Now, there is risks with transition milk, I know, because you can have issues with iones and you're pooling it. That's something you work with your own vet on. But colostrum and transition milk. And we've given the calf this really good start. And the next thing we think about is feeding. And I really like talking about this because I think it's an important point. You probably came here to learn about calf health. But I have 5 kids, so a lot of excitement in our house tonight for the toy show. But I love seeing them drinking milk, eating cheese, whatever it is, animal protein. Why? Because of the nutritional value. You're the ones who produce the food, and you should never underestimate the quality of food we produce. So when you look at milk, did you ever think about what's in milk? Why is milk so important? So our calves are actually like our kids, they're monogastrics. They derive all their nutrition from milk for the first weeks of life. And if you think about what's in milk, so it's 87.5% water, it's got protein in it, amino acids. Why do I like my kids drinking milk or protein? Because those amino acids are involved in the immune system. Growing muscle, frame, hormones, even those antibodies, they're all proteins. So the milk for the calf is key. There's fat in milk. Why is fat important? It's really important from the energy perspective of the calf. Sugars like lactose. So I want you to remember one thing, that we've got to link feeding with immunity. And if we want to look at how much milk we feed calves, is going to have an impact on how they perform. No more so than I want my kids to drink milk. Calves, I want to see milk going into calves. So getting nutrition right plays a huge part in the immunity story for calves. Now, I'm a big fan of, if it's not broken, don't try and fix it. I know everybody's doing different things, be it once a day feeding, twice a day, whatever it might be. But I am noticing a trend on farm, and it's a good trend, that we're looking at the calf not from a perspective of trying to wean them really quickly, but we're looking from a perspective of what does the calf want, and if we give the calf more milk, what's the outcome we're going to see? And I'm not saying everyone has to do it, but I think if I was to come back here in 10 years, if we're all here, I think more and more farms will be feeding a little bit more milk. And it's because of that link between nutrition, immune health, and function. And particularly in seasonal, a lot of you down here in this part of the world are going to be feeding calves in colder weather. The calf has to work harder. So just don't underestimate the seesaw. Everyone happy with the seesaw? You're all with me? No one's asleep yet, so I can't see with the light anyway. That's really key. And the other thing about calves is they love consistency. So consistency in feeding. And I wish I had this magic tool. Well, I think Precision Microbes is fantastic, but it's only a tool. But the real detail, the real calf health performance, and I see some people in the audience, and I know you and I've been on your farms, is attention to detail. This might be very simple, boring stuff, but it's these small details that really deliver. So when we look at more milk, it's not something you all have to do, maybe it'll come up in the questions. Look at your feeding curves. If you're going to start calves on more milk, you have to start from the beginning to get a bit of tuck in the belly. To get the abomasum going, you need to get milk in early. And I just think, really, it's a really key part of the health story. And again, I can't spend enough time really also telling you about the quality of food you produce. I really think it's important, but it equally goes back to the calf. So I'm going to invite Declan O'Donnell from JFC up now. He's on TikTok on the back of the room there, he wasn't even listening. I'm only joking, Declan. We're going to have a chat about automatic feeders, because more and more people are feeding through automatic feeders. So thanks for coming up, Declan.
Thanks, Tommy.
It never gets old me slagging you. So will you tell people a little bit about who are JFC? I know most people know who you are. Again, I travel a lot, and I'm seeing these yellow and black boxes all over the UK, all over Europe. But tell people a little bit about maybe who you are and JFC.
Yeah, look, Declan O'Donnell is my own name, folks. I'm sales manager with GFC for the Evolution Feeders. I'm joined here with Ger Clifford. He's our sales rep for this area. So look, we'll be around at the end if anybody has any questions or whatever. But yeah, look, automatic feeders, they're getting very popular. We are doing a lot more work on farms in terms of layout, design. I see some faces here in the head that would have, or in the crowd, some heads here in the crowd that would have contacted us about designing a shed or retrofitting a shed, and that's something we put a big focus on, and that's some of the points we're going to cover.
I have a couple of questions written down here for you, and again, one of the things I see is that, look, no system is perfect, and feeders have their challenges, but more and more farms are putting them in, and by a majority, any farmer I get feedback from are happy with them, but there's some common mistakes. So first thing is putting the feeder into the shed, positioning it. It's very easy maybe when you're building a new shed, but maybe retrofitting. Talk about shed design and some top tips, the things you see people making mistakes on. If you're going to put a feeder in, think about drainage and position in the shed.
Yeah, again, look, people often come to us, they would have built a shed maybe 2 years ago, and they're thinking about putting in an automatic feeder now. We would always say to people to contact us. We'll say now, if you're thinking about putting in a feeder in 3 years' time, that you can have the shed set up, you can have the drainage in the right place, ducting in the right place, your services in the right place. It's very easy then fit a feeder to that shed. Too many people make the mistake of building a shed for teat feeding with a centre passage down the middle of it. Yeah. And then when you want to fit a feeder to that, it's not so suitable for automatic feeding. You won't have drainage in the right place, and it just won't be a user-friendly shed for automatic feeding and for the farmer.
So if I think about the feeder, okay, it saves on labour, so time is your most precious resource, so that is a great saving. But one of the challenges for the calf, I think about the calf, they're all coming to the one point. So a couple of things I want to ask you about is how many calves are you recommending on a station?
The stations will do 35 calves, Tommy, yeah, 35 calves. That's kind of the roughly comfortable number there. And on that point, we would always say to people, under that station, have a drain teed back into, like a lot of calf sheds now have a non-bedded kind of dry area. Have a gully under the station going back into that channel so that the stuff can get away.
Okay.
Generally, these stations, you'd have 2 feed stations to the left of it, 2 feed stations to the right of it. You could potentially have 50, 70 calves come to that point to feed. So the quicker you get that stuff away, and it will get messy and it will get sloppy around there.
Okay, because I'm going to talk about hygiene next. It is very relevant. So one of the issues I see with feeders sometimes is that the water going into it, and I'll talk about water, the water going into the feeder, pressure-wise, and clean water going into the feeder, because you're putting in water, you're heating it up, you're putting it through pipes, and you're putting powder through there. So if you're putting a feeder in, are you testing water in the shed?
Absolutely, just before it comes into the feeder,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And as you often refer to, at the source of, not at the source of where the point is used. Test it before it goes into the machine. One thing we always watch out for is limescale in sheds. It will build up on the lines, on the stainless steel bowls. You will need to descale on that. But before that, you should have a water softener in, because if there's limescale building up in your lines and in your pipes, it will give a place for the fats in the microplacer to stick to.
And these boys love them.
And that's what you love.
Yeah. So the boys love them. So, okay, typical, quickly, do's and don'ts if you have a feeder, calibrating, looking after your feeder. What are the do's and don'ts?
Yeah, look, so a couple of things I suppose that are often looked over, and we had a couple of open days this week, and some very good questions came up at it as well. Do's and don'ts. Too often than not, people buy an automatic feeder, fit it in the shed, throw in a bag of microplacer, put calves on it, and everything is hunky-dory. A month, 6 weeks in, calves aren't where they want to be. So what we say to everybody, when you're setting up your feeder at the start of the season, link up with your powder rep. They'll offer support in terms of setting up feed programs according to the type calf you have, whether they're a crossbred or a Holstein or whatever they are. Set up the program according to the type calf you have, your own rearing objectives. Do you want to feed a bag and a half of microplacer or 3 bags of microplacer? So those are things that are often overlooked. People just fire in a bag of microplacer, put calves on. Once they're feeding, they're happy, but they might be happy for 6 weeks and then they realise that their calves aren't where they want to be. So that's probably something just to make sure that it's your programs are set up, your feed programs are set up. Another thing, calibration. We would say to everybody, calibrate on every pallet of powder. Some people do it once a week, some people do it once a fortnight, but definitely calibrate, because again, just to make sure that your machine is putting out the right amount of powder, not too little, not too much.
Okay. One other question, obviously I'm biased now here, but because Precision Microbes is a liquid, and I'll talk about why it's a liquid, you need a dosing system, a liquid dosing system to put it through the milk, don't you?
Correct, yeah. So there's a liquid pump mounted inside the machine. You leave your 20-litre drum of Precision Microbes behind it here. There'll be a pipe coming out of the machine, going into your drum. The machine will suck it in and it's dispensed in. There's just an extra service inside the mixing bowl. You'll see it dropping in just the same as the water comes in and it's mixed up and fed out.
Okay. Any other mistakes people make with feeders that you need to talk about, or are you happy enough?
Teats, I suppose, as well, are an important part. Just to make sure that teats are sterilised daily. I see a bottle of Milton you have there.
Yeah.
Take off the teats. We would often see people, they take off the 4 teats in the morning, throw them into a bucket of Milton. They'd have 4 teats in that bucket of Milton. They'd then take them out and put them drying, and they'd have a set already drying. So they'd have 3 sets of teats on the go. So rotate the teats every day. Just build it into your morning routine when you're
What
coming
about
out.
put a flushing system on the teat that keeps it clean, because there is a source of infection?
Yeah, you can put a teat washing system on the machine. Again, where it works well, but you do need to have adequate drainage. In a lot of retrofitting sheds, it wouldn't be suitable for retrofitting sheds, but where it works, it does work well, yeah.
Brilliant. Declan, thank you very much. And I know you're available for questions as well at the end. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
One of the things about JFC is that it's great to see an Irish company when you travel abroad, and the feedback is always good because of the service and the quality of the machine. So I really appreciate your involvement as well. Okay, so feeding. So we've got the foundation of the calf health story in. We've got the walls built, and this is probably the third most important area of calf rearing. So it's hygiene. Now, admittedly, I mightn't make the greatest calf rearer. Nobody go out and look in my car and see the coffee cups from last year sitting in the front seat. But when we think about, back to my seesaw again, hygiene is basically trying to think about how we drive down infection pressure. How do we drive down the amount of bugs animals are prone to or exposed to? So when we think about hygiene, we're trying to minimize down viruses, bugs, bacteria. But the problem is we're on farms. And there's loads of SH1T, there's lots of infection pressure, and I think it's important to remember that we're trying to do it in a way where, I suppose, that it's just repeatable. So it's back to habits again, I'll talk about that. So if we think about calves, we think about the bugs that affect calves, 70+% of pre-wean disease is scours. So where do they come from? Where's the main source of scour bugs? They're typically coming the other way out of the gut now, from the cow. So the cow is the source of a lot of these diseases. She's built up an immunity to it. So the problem is, I don't know if you can see this here on the telly over there, but the problem is, when we think about a nice healthy gut, what are these pathogens actually doing? So they're actually, if you look at this here, can you see that in the camera, Mike, can you? Yeah, so they're going in and they're damaging the lining of the gut, the scour pathogens. And they're disrupting the flow of milk from the powder, the nutrition, from going in through a normal digestive system to a damaged area which isn't working, meaning the milk goes through. And not only does it go through, it brings fluid out with it. So look, scour pathogens are probably the big one. Pneumonia is another one. We see a lot of pneumonia, but a calf with scour is probably 15 times more likely to get pneumonia. But we've one major problem with disease. We've got one major problem. We can't see it. So, you wouldn't mind shaking my hand, would you? Okay. Right. I woke up this morning with a sniffly nose. I've been coughing. Sorry, you wouldn't shake my hand again, would you? So, he obviously is thinking differently than the first time he shook my hand. Because now he's thinking about potentially what I'm spreading. But we can't see disease. So obviously I'm a visual learner, and I was trying to explain disease being spread on farm one day to a husband and wife, and we were talking about crypto, and I was explaining that a calf ingests 100 oocysts, and it produces 100 billion. And those numbers don't make any sense. So I said, right, kids at home, we had arts and crafts on the Saturday, the week before, and there was glitter all over the house. I was brushing my teeth and there was glitter in the toothpaste. And I just brought glitter out with me when we were looking at doing a farm visit. And I said, look, it's like the calf ingests this amount of oocysts. And because their immune system is lower, they're producing this amount. So I started spreading the glitter around the calf pen. And the wife got it, and the husband was laughing at me still. And I always remember, he rang me back about 3 days later. I've told this story many times. But he was in having his egg at breakfast. and the table started to glitter. And he suddenly got the whole thing, because what happened was the glitter he was walking through in the shed, that infection pressure, but we can't see disease. The other thing is you're very busy on farm. I know you're busy, and the food you produce is high quality, and it takes a lot of work. I always think about I really think about farming I'm not producing food, but I always think about one really point that hit me was when I was queuing at the start of COVID outside Dunn's in the line with the masks on. And there was only one feckin' thing I wanted, was food to go home. So when you think about the industries that really were important during COVID, primary industries, food production, but I also am aware it's hard. So when I try and taper my advice that it's reasonably practical, but we have to think about hygiene on our farm for some calves. We have to think about how do we reduce infection pressure. So we have to think about where are the key areas that we can get problems. So we want a clean calving pen. That's really important. Navel hygiene. But as I said, this is not like someone going around inspecting, but I'm just interested in how things work. And it was the dump bucket and the stomach tube. They're the kind of areas that if you focus on hygiene. I was on a farm yesterday in Mead, and they power wash the dump buckets twice a day. And it's that attention to detail of the key risk areas, so feeding equipment. And the problem is with hygiene, and Declan kind of said it there, that when we think about anywhere we've fat and protein, milk, we get the build-up of a kind of a slime. You'll all know this yourselves from being on farm. Even in pipes and teats, we get the build-up of a slime. We call this slime biofilm. And the reason this is important, it's a very important point, is that my bugs love this, because what they do, and obviously this is not to life size now, just in case anyone's going home looking for these, is they go in and they actually hide in it, they feed in it, and it gets bigger. And the problem then is if this is a water pipe, and I'm feeding this into an automatic feeder, I'm putting in milk and heat, I'm creating the ideal conditions. So, a really important concept around calf hygiene is we need to look at it from two aspects, particularly with milk and particularly with colostrum. And again, two well-known brands here, Declan spotted them. The difference between a detergent and a disinfectant. A detergent, everyone recognize this one? The old dishwasher got rid of this, nearly got rid of this lad completely. But Fairy Liquid's a really effective detergent. It gets rid of the slime, but it doesn't kill. But Milton is a very effective disinfectant. Sometimes I mix those two up and I confuse people. So detergents and disinfectants. So when we look at feeding equipment, we look at stomach tubes, we look at dump buckets. You're all familiar with this if you're milking. You use detergents and acids in your wash. You need to apply the same rules when we're looking at feeding equipment. So it's not a surprise when I go on farm and I see very little calf health issues that usually hygiene is really well done. And a simple wash routine, even if you're washing feeding equipment like milk bars once a day, just even with cold water is very effective. A hot detergent wash and then using disinfectants. And I'm from Kerry, so I like a few stories. Someone said there recently on the back, they met my mother at a funeral. She said she was in good form. So in Kerry, a good funeral is nearly like a good wedding. Anyway, so when I was in England, I was at this event, and had all my guts and I had all this thing laid out, and I had sponges laid down. And this woman came over, and she grabbed one of the sponges, and she went off, and I said, hey, come back with my sponge, where are you going? She said, I thought it was a free sponge. I said, no, that's all part of my gut. She said, I love cleaning, right? I said, all right. So I was chatting to her. I said, what's your story? And she said, I've been rearing calves for the last 5 years. And she had a head in her that I knew there was another 35 years or 30 years she was doing something else. And I said, what were you doing before that? Oh, I was a professional carpet cleaner. I love cleaning. So I met the manager of the farm later on, and I put two and two together and we were chatting. And he said that lady on her own probably got rid of crypto on the farm. Why? Because clean. So I'd make a bad calf rearer, I know that. But we have to think about hygiene as probably a key area. So plenty straw, even one of the best and free disinfectants in the world is fresh air. What does fresh air do? It kills bugs, it keeps things dry. So plenty straw, plenty fresh air. Okay, other things with calves is probably all in, all out systems. So you have a situation where you have calves going into one pen and they're staying there. And like, that's very basic stuff I've said to you. Now the other tip I've seen on farm where hygiene is excellent, and I've been on some of the farms that are here, is have a place where you can go and clean equipment. Make a habit easy. So if I wanted to go running in the morning, they say put your shoes and your shorts beside the bed. So if you think about hygiene like a habit, if you were to focus it on this year, well, could I put in a hot water heater? Could I get a brush? Could I get a bucket? You know, have I got a detergent and a disinfectant? And how can I make this easy and quick to do and repeatable? Some people are excellent at it. I'd make a bad calf rear because that's the way I'd have to think about it. I'd have to set it up myself to make it easy. Okay, so there are three of the main things with calves, I think. I'm going to mention a few more, and then I'm going to talk about microbes. So, this is a very basic concept. I'm going to disappear into the gut. Someone asked me, what are you going to do with the gut after? And I was in a farm in Meath yesterday. I said, sure, it might make a good calf hut, I'll sell it. If we think about this really simple concept of space per calf. I always set these things up wrong. So, if we think about immunity and infection pressure, we've done a lot of the hard work. We've done a lot of the hard work already. Sorry, I just set this up so it doesn't fall down on me. So we've done a lot of the hard work on building immunity, driving down infection pressure. But space per animal is a really key thing. And I think it's an important target. A lot of you now will be considering, well, maybe up to this whole slurry storage thing, investing in calf houses. And one of the top tips I can give you is if you're building houses, I would have probably, even with the feeder, my max would be 25 calves per feeder, 30 maybe max, but when it comes to pens, space per calf. So this is 1.5 meters squared, okay? That's the legal limit on calves. But I'm seeing more and more farms are going for this 2.5 meters squared. I know this costs money, and you're spending your money, I'm spending your money, but don't underestimate the impact of giving animals more space. It's huge. So remember as well, a calf is born at 35, 40 kilos. It grows to 80, 90 kilos inside. Space per animal is key, because what do bugs love? They love animals in poor airspace, and they love them to be together, and you get more moisture build up, and you get all the things that they love. So even drainage, actually, I should have mentioned drainage. Drainage is an important part of the hygiene story. So if you're looking at calf housing, this is only advice. I would encourage you to be looking for more space. I met a vet recently, and he'd work with chickens, pigs, he'd even work with alligators, farming them. And, you know, you go to somebody that's 30 or 5 or 40 years experience, no different than anyone else, and you ask him, what's the one thing that you learned from dealing with this or that? And he said, it's all about people, and it's all about space for animals inside. I thought it was interesting. He said, it doesn't matter whether it's a chicken, a pig, or a crocodile, he said, give them space when we have them in a house. And that's a challenge for us in Ireland, because I see this with cows as well, that we have animals in at a very critical period. So that attention to detail is absolutely key. And again, we're thinking about the future of your business. It's a really big investment. And the bugs find it harder when you have more space, but if you cram animals into a shed, that's when the challenges start. Okay, so again, I was very lucky to do a bit of traveling back in 2018. These yolks would hardly last the end of this roadshow. I was very lucky to do a bit of traveling in 2018. I got to visit a lot of countries. I was doing a Nuffield scholarship, and I was looking at particularly dairy farming and the future. And it kind of opened my eyes a little bit to, I suppose, people's perceptions of farming and what we do. And I got a little bit annoyed about the calf welfare thing. I think that's something shouldn't be owned outside. It should be brought back in. And my concept was very simple when I went to write my report. I basically came up with this really simple idea that, right, we're farming animals, they're production and performance animals. If we give them more of what they want, they're going to deliver more from a production perspective. So that works really well on cows. Some of you may have done cow signals training. And what does that look like for calves? Well, it starts off by, well, what does the calf actually want? So the calf could drink 10 or 12 litres. It could suckle 12 times a day. It's very prone to the cold. It likes a dry, warm lie. They're social creatures. All these sort of small things. And I'd say, if I was saying this to myself 15 years ago, I just wanted to treat the calf, get on. But if we're thinking about health, people often ask me, what's the best type of shed you can build? You build a shed for you and the calf, because you're going to be in there every day. So how can you make it easy for you and better for the calf? So straw, good drainage, dry lie. A calf spends 80% of its day down here. So when I'm assessing a calf shed, I'm getting old for this now, but I have to be down here. You can see Charles Chavas there, give him a wink. So when you think about it, I couldn't have done that yesterday. I burst my pants when I jumped up on the stage, so I'll get away with it today. But if you think about a calf, what do they want? They want a dry, warm lie. Under 15 degrees, the calf has to work hard to stay warm. Okay? So what does that mean for your immune system? If the calf is getting cold, if the calf is in a damp condition, the bugs love it and the immune system doesn't. So thinking about your calf, giving him more of what it wants, or she wants, or it wants, whatever you want, makes sense. So in Ireland, one of our challenges is our weather is an incredible variable. So I've come to like, some people, we don't do calf jackets. We had a few of them there. You're all going to get one in your bucket. Calf jackets are good. They work well in an open shed. I find a more open shed with more milk works well. But the problem is I can't give you all an exact replica for what you should do. But start thinking about, if I invest more in my calf, more in the environment, I'll get less disease, I'll get less sickness, and that calf will drive on to perform, particularly your heifers or even your beef animals. The other thing that's very hard to get right in a shed is fresh air. So some of you are still old enough to remember before we had phones and we actually went outside, get out in the fresh air. Remember that? Get out in the fresh air. My mother kept saying to me, get out in the fresh air. Why? Because fresh air is very, very good at killing things. It's getting a bit stuffy in here, actually. But fresh air, there's not much fresh air in here now with the heater earlier on, but fresh air can actually kill bugs in the air. It keeps things dry. So fresh air is actually excellent. Sure, then all we need to do is open up our sheds. But too much fresh air makes calves cold. So again, there's not one brilliant piece of advice I can give you, except if you're getting a lot of pneumonia in your calves, if you're getting a lot of coughing, a lot of sickness, go in and think about fresh air. Are you getting enough of it in there? And we have a very sophisticated tool for measuring fresh air. Does anyone have any idea what it is? I'll give you a hint. It's between your eyes. Our nose. Problem with our nose, never works that well in our own farm. Okay? But if you're smelling ammonia in sheds, we're creating the right environment for bugs. So we need to look at fresh air. The challenge in an Irish system is constantly we get changing weather patterns, which are huge. So my advice on calves is, if you're building a shed, if you're thinking about your calf, build a shed for yourself, because you're going to spend the whole day in it. So is it easy to clean out? Is it easy to feed the calf? Have you got the things that you're there? It's a long-term investment. And then think about the calf. It wants a warm, dry lie, it wants fresh air, and good drainage. There's the bottle. Okay, so that's really the keys to successful calf rearing. So I want to pick on a few things that I think are right interesting as well. Good timing. Water. We think about water quality. It's often underestimated in our cows. It's probably underestimated in our calves as well. It's a very important ingredient in the calf health story. And when we think about water, we've got to remember that our farms are getting bigger. And when we look at water, we think about it at the source, be it the well or the mains. Now we've added sheds onto sheds onto sheds and pipes onto pipes onto pipes. And often we have header tanks sitting in calf sheds in seasonal systems. And when water's not flowing, it also produces a layer of biofilm. Do you remember what biofilm does to the infection pressure story, don't you? So I told this story about water at a meeting in Kilkenny last year. And there was one man had a header tank in his shed. He was a seasonal calver. And he had a header tank in his shed. And he had finally found all the causes of his problem was water. So water isn't the cause of all problems. But he nearly knocked us down when we were having our sandwiches after to go home and look into the header tank. Because if you have a header tank sitting up there where Craig is, Craig can be the header tank. That's the first Craig. Yeah. Excellent, good header tank. That if you're a seasonal system, that water sits there and it builds a biofilm. Now, I'm after spending a fortune with Declan O'Donnell down the back there on a feeder, and it's the best feeder in the country according to him, and I'm getting bloat from my calves. I'm going to blame you first, Declan, then the milk powder, right? But I never think about water, okay? Just be aware of water. If we've dirty water going into feeders, so it's not the root of all problems, but certainly I think more and more farms just need to think about it. Remember what I said to you about calf rearing? This is the frustrating part about it. It's like links in a chain. It's small links. We'd love to find one thing, and we'd want to find one solution that would solve all our problems. But ultimately, we manage the cow, we manage the feeding, the hygiene. It's all these little pieces that add together. These are the habits. Again, we can't rear healthy calves and not expect no disease. So good stockmanship is still an incredibly important part of the story. So we need to look at what does a healthy calf look like? From the tip of the nose to the back of the arse. We need to know what a healthy calf looks like. I'm not from a farm. I love farming. My parents were teachers. I grew up in my granduncle's small farm in Kerry. I love farming, but I wasn't a natural stock person. So I actually had to learn what a healthy animal looked like. And that sounds mad, I know, but the more I spent looking at the normal, the more I got really good at picking the abnormal. And the thing about disease is that if I'm not getting disease early, it's doing damage. So remember I talked about scour. I don't know if you can get into my colon here, Mike. Sorry. So if you look at a healthy gut, right, when we've damage to the tissue, the longer an infection is taking place, the more damage that's been done, the harder it is to get an animal to recover. So we still need to be very, very clued in around effective treatments, getting in early, acting quickly, having a thermometer. So stockmanship is still a great skill. This is our second big meeting, and one of the great things about these meetings is the age profile and the demographics. Right down to the very youngest, very quiet babies, 10 out of 10. So one of the things I'd advise to the younger people is, like, good stockmanship is still an incredible skill. We've all this technology and everything like that, but don't forget to look at the animals. Okay, I'm nearly at the end of my story on calf health. I just want to talk about one other thing, and it's very relevant. So I mentioned earlier on that my job is kind of my hobby. I'm one of those boring people. And I'm 23 years plus as a vet. Really like the whole animal health story and reading about it. And after 23 years, you'd think I'd be giving you some incredibly insightful, different things. But if you were to ask me now, what's the biggest factor that causes disease in animals and probably humans? It's stress. So what does stress do? It drops down the immunity. And we have to understand what stress is actually about. So stress is actually a necessary tool. So if Eamon got upset that time with me making a joke with the hands and the sniffling and decided to knock me out with a box, I'd have a choice. I could either run out the door or hit him back. Now, he's a mid-sized guy, I'd probably take him. But animals have the same response, flight or fight. It's a really useful tool, but everything has changed through domestication and farming. So now we don't see the outward effects of stress. They're kind of cumulative. And this is not a dunce hat, this is my cortisol. Because I want to explain to you a really big factor, I think, with disease. And some of the stressors we can control, be it feeding, how we handle animals, etc., but some of them are out of our control. The biggest one is weather. And you're all farming, so you know what happens when the weather changes in the springtime. You're sure a couple of days later animals get sick, because what stress does is it produces a hormone called cortisol in the brain. And cortisol does a couple of things, especially when it's been dripped out slowly. It drives down immunity, which is key to our story of health, but it also goes into the gut and has a very negative impact on the digestive system. It speeds up motility. Anyone got that nervous feeling? JP's about to get it, he's coming up on stage in 2 minutes. You know, that nervous feeling, the butterflies in your stomach. So stress is a big, big factor. So I suppose that opens me up to Precision Microbes and it being a tool in the system, because no matter what we do, on farm and all the attention to detail, we do need tools to help us, be it vaccines, be it the liquid pro and postbiotics, but don't underestimate the impact of stress. So, I need a break from talking, so I'm going to let JP do a small bit of talking up on the stage. Will you come up, JP? I'm going to take a little drink of water myself. I hope it's clean after all my talk, clean water.
Thanks, Tommy.
So JP, I'm going to talk about precision microbes, right? And I won't be going on too much longer, but we were down in Cork on Thursday night, and several people said to me, I never mentioned where precision microbes just came out of. I said, right, fair enough. So I said, there's a good opportunity to get you up as the founder and someone who started this whole story to give people a bit of background. So before I start talking about the gut microbiome, would you just tell people a little bit, because it's an Irish company, manufacturing and all, it's been a long road, a hard road, but it's an Irish success story. So can you give people a little bit of background on the company?
Yeah, first of all, just a co-founder. I'm not the full brains behind the microbes. But yeah, I suppose we started our journey around a decade and a half ago, and we were looking at soil health. And soil health was mainly focused on growing mediums such as fine turf and things like that. So that's where we started our journey. A lot of the IP that we produced for making our blends for grass health, or turf, we looked at the animal health end of things. And, said, well,
and the use of microbes.
Yeah, and this could apply to this. Now, it wasn't just as simple as we produce something here and we had to go to the Department of Agriculture, we had to show them a huge amount of data and a huge amount of R&D we've done over the last 10 years, and they eventually, they put everything through a microscope, shall I say, excuse the pun, and eventually gave us a license in 2019.
One of the interesting stories of microbes is, and you experienced this because you started in the plant world, and when you're using biology, it's sort of frowned upon as kind of nicky-nacky and kind of alternative, right? And you experienced the same thing as when I brought this concept. I'm a bit like the iceberg, so underneath me is the people who produce it, who've done the research, and I came on and just yap about it, and I think it's a project of a lifetime for me. But when you're using, what I thought was interesting, when you started in the plants, it was the feedback from the groundsmen around the plant tissue. You solved one problem, and the groundsmen started saying, look, it's doing this, this, and this, and it kind of, you had this awakening that there's a role for microbes in plants and elsewhere.
Yeah, we were looking at the flora and fauna of the growing medium as such. And by us improving that led to all these host of benefits, such as the resistance to fungicide or less fungicide applications and resistance to disease in general. So. And
then you developed the animal products. We've been on a bit of a journey with it. It's manufactured in Dublin. It's organic certified. Some people said to me at the start, because it's organic certified, that it's some sort of a marketing woohoo just to target organic farmers. When you propagate live microorganisms, you can't have any chemicals in the propagation.
Absolutely. We need to control the supply chain. So we're dealing at the early stages when we're propagating this, we want to make sure we get the counts moving as fastly as possible. And if we have anything in the supply chains that's going to stop that, such as chemicals and things like that, being used on the plants or the herbs that we're using, it could have a negative effect. And that's the reason we go down the organic route.
And just general feedback, it's really interesting to see how Precision Microbes has grown and the feedback, because I know you're toiling away. It's easy to do the yapping, right, and the talking. You're in the manufacturing end of it. And one thing I like about you, and one thing I like about the company, is I hold myself to the same standards. You try and be consistent, do the things well all the time. Making live microorganisms takes work, doesn't it? And the feedback is good to get out and meet people.
Yeah, it is. Like, as you said, I'm very much in a lab setting or in manufacturing, and we don't get to talk to the farmers. We have a distributor, Interchem, which is here today. So I don't get to talk to the farmers, and that's why it's so good to go to the ploughing, which we've been to in the last 4 years, and I get to hear off the farmers. Now, Tommy, you give us all the feedback, which is fantastic, because you're at the cold.
So any negative feedback today, right? JP's the man. Positive stuff for me. So that's why I brought you today, just to listen a bit. No, you get very little of it. Just in general terms, though, future for microbes, what's our plan? I don't have a clue what the plan is. You know?
I thought you were going to.
No, we're going to continue to grow. Continue to manufacture.
No, absolutely. And we're a small company. We're probably boxing above our weight a little bit. We're trying to be educational based and give as much back as possible. I think the future is bright because we need to think of these. We need to get our mindset away from antibiotic use and to reduce that antibiotic use. And I really feel we're a tool in that.
We're a tool. Again, antibiotics are key. Reducing them as an aim, we're a tool. Okay, thank you very much, JP. Thanks for that background. So I got given out to by farmers to not give any background, so I said no better person to actually do it. And it's been a lot of years of work. It's actually amazing to see the work that goes into something like this. And anything that's doing some semi-well is a bit like the iceberg effect. You never see what goes on underneath it. So I'm nearly finished. I'm conscious of time, but I have to talk about gut health. So I started this project 4 years ago as a little bit of a skeptic, I have to say, but I have an open mind. So I wanted to look at, I was always looking for supplements and things that work, but I struggled with the whole area of probiotics. But I had met people who said to me, much smarter than me, that if anything comes your way in the biological space and microbiome, that's going to be a really interesting area. When I was traveling, I was with a professor in Hong Kong, and she was talking about the work they were doing about mapping the microbiomes of the pets in Hong Kong, because they give out antibiotics to their dogs and cats in Hong Kong like Smarties. And she had all this mapping of this gut, and she was explaining to me. So when this project came along, I thought it was very interesting. So what's really interesting for me is that, again, when we think about this immunity and infection pressure, geez, we're doing a bad job on calves. I better flick this the right way. So when we think about bugs, we think about bacteria, we always think about pathogens. That's good time into coughing, right? So, but actually, most microbes are actually I've read guys as well, they're either harmful, which is about 0.01% of the population. Most microbes are sort of commensals, they're just there, they're not very functional. But a lot of beneficial microbes act in a positive way in the immune system. And it's kind of a shift in your mind. And this is not just in the gut, it's in soil, it's in our cells, it's in plants. That's where you started with, the use of beneficial microbes. And I'm not knocking chemistry. If I'm sick or the kids are sick, I love having antibiotics there as tools, no more than you do for calves. But there is a kind of movement back to, we've used chemistry and it's brought us to a point, but we have to kind of go back and understand biology. And that starts at soil, it starts in our animals. And that took me into understanding the gut and how the gut works. So the reason I got the gut is this is a very complicated subject. It's very hard. And I'm at this now 4 years, and I'm still trying to make it as simple as I can. I think I fail nearly every time. But inside in our digestive tract, in our calves' digestive tract, there's these millions of microorganisms, beneficial viruses, fungi, protozoa, and they're actually acting like another organ. And what they're doing is, they're doing a couple of key things. Get me milk powder. They're actually involved in digestion. So they're regulating, so this is a damaged gut, but a healthy gut surface. They're regulating the function, the layers. Most guts have a layer of slime, mucus on them. They've really, I suppose, if you've got integrity in your gut, that means that the food that's going in is going to be absorbed. And the bugs are playing a very important role in digestion. And why is that important? Because we want to look at calf performance. We want to look at health and nutrition. And I spent too much time thinking, but I was thinking actually, we spend a lot of time talking about quality of nutrition. But if the gut's not right, that quality of nutrition is not going to be digested. So my new equation is nutrition in plus absorption equals output. And that's no different to ourselves. The amount of people who come up to me after and ask personal questions about their gut. So digestion and these microbes are key. Now, the other really interesting thing for me was, better keep my stuff together, was that when we think about the immune system, how much of the immune system's in the gut? Was anyone listening to me? 70% I heard, right? So why is 70% of our immune system in the gut? If we think about the digestive system of our cells or our calves, if we put it out, it wouldn't be far off covering half this area in a baby calf and maybe this whole area in an older calf. So you've all this digestive coming in. So the immune system is focused in the gut because that's where it's needed the most. And this is where it gets really interesting. The bugs in the gut are actually communicating with the immune system. And they're often just telling it to, things are good in here, you can calm down. It's basically, people will hear about inflammation. So if we've got an unhealthy gut microbiome, if we get a shift in the bugs, we get more immune activity in the gut, and we get inflammation. And the problem with that is that I might have said, I'm not sure I said in my notes, that 15%, a calf is 15 times more likely to get pneumonia if they have disruptions in the gut. It's because of that impact of immunity. So digestion, immune function, and this is where nature gets really interesting as well. So most places you go, there's a quorum. So inside in the gut, you've good bacteria. When you've got pathogens coming in, they're providing protection, they're competing. We see this in soil, we see this everywhere. It's a bit like a pub. You know, you might have a nice pub where you go into this man smiling, you must go for a pint the odd time. You go into a pub, your local pub, and everything's good. You have the same lads in there the whole time, and everyone's getting on. And next thing, the owner changes, and he lets a few undesirables in. And suddenly, the whole atmosphere in the pub changes, and you don't go back to the pub anymore. But our gut's the same. Anywhere you have microbes, we're creating this quorum, this synergy in biology. We see it in soil as well. So I think, don't worry about whether you use precision microbes or not, but we do have to start thinking about gut health as being the center of the calf health story. So the other thing I think is very interesting and going to be interesting in the future is how do calves actually get their microbiome? So I'll be a calf in the womb. The calf is coming out, no different to ourselves, out through the vagina, picking up microbes from its mother, seeding out the young gut, picking up microbes from the feces of its mother. So one of the beautiful things about this role, apart from talking a lot, is I get to do involved in a lot of the research work, looking at what we're doing in trials. And one of the things what you look at is maybe we can influence in the future the cow to influence the calf and create a healthier microbiome. But the calf is getting its microbiome from the mother. And I suppose this kind of opened the door to the start of using precision microbes as a supplement. Now, I have to say, when it comes to using microbes or anything like that, some people will be here and they won't use any supplements. They'll do all the basics really well, and that's fine. People have asked me at other talks about other supplements. If you're using something and it works, that's fine. Precision microbes is quite simple and quite straightforward, actually. If you use it, you can actually I always said to people, put a batch of calves on it and compare. So, but if you are using precision microbes, why would you use it? So the first part of the story, JP's gone running off. I thought I was going to call him up again. The first part of the story is why is precision microbes different? And we have to understand why we use supplements. So if we look at the good bugs in the gut, the concept of probiotics and supplementation was always, well, we're not going to use the calf bugs, but we're going to use beneficial bacteria, and we're going to put more of them into the gut to supplement what the good bugs are doing, hoping to improve digestion, regulate immunity, and provide protection. So that was always the concept of probiotics. And actually, it's actually what they produce inside in the gut is really important as well, the postbiotics. So we've got the bacteria and what they produce. And actually, when you think about supplements, remember I mentioned colostrum earlier on? Most of you are still awake, which is good. Colostrum has prebiotics in it. These are the feeds. So when we think of different supplements, it can be quite confusing. We've prebiotics, they're in colostrum. Fiber for humans is an equivalent. They feed the good bacteria. We have probiotics, which are the bacteria themselves. And then we have the postbiotics, which are very important because they're the functional element. The bacteria, like factories, they're the ones that, there's loads of them in postbiotics. They regulate immune function. They're often telling the immune system just to calm down, things are under control. They stimulate cells in here to produce mucin, which aids in that digestive story. So what I was interested in when Precision Microbes came to me first was they talked about format. And they talked about how you use microbes is really key. So they explained to me that traditionally, when we're using probiotics, we take them and we freeze dry them, which is commercially much easier to do. So we put them into powders and pastes. But when we give a bacteria that's freeze-dried, it has to reactivate and then produce its metabolites. Now, if you think about a calf with scour, its gut transit time is massively sped up, and it has to survive stomach acid. So they explained to me, we've come up with a way of propagating microbes in a live format. So instead of having freeze-dried bacteria, we have them in their format that they're live, and we control that by pH and acid. Okay, that makes sense. And then when we propagate them, we have all the postbiotics they produce. So there's a significant difference. So I said, okay, that's enough to me. You've got my interest. So I began doing some trial work. And this is where it got really interesting. So the feedback started coming back from farm pretty consistently. Now, I'm still a big believer in the basics being done well. But farmers started talking about appetite, recovery of calves, less severity of scour, and I've been on farm a lot, nothing like I'd seen before. So they had my interest, and we did more trial work. Some of the farms here have done trial work, early adopters. We started looking at growth rates on calves, and all the trial work produced the same results, pretty much, that calves like the taste of it. If they got diarrhea long term, they tended to recover quicker, and the severity went down. And then we looked at, I think we have 4 independent trials done now as well, looking at growth rates. The one thing that I was a bit bothered by in the trials was none of my trial work looked the same as every farm. So we started getting more farms, and the word spread. The challenge with trial work I have found is that it can be different in each farm. And I think it's a very important message for me, and JP is okay with it, that it's a tool on farm along with the basics. And then we had a trial done this year by May Allen in Scotland. And she actually won the British Society of Animal Sciences Thesis of the Year. And she looked at a much more detailed study, 25 calves in each. And she was looking at our product on Cryptosporidium. Now we're not a cure for Cryptosporidium, but what we seem to be doing is building resilience in the gut. And she's seen the same things again: appetite, recovery, and less severity. And that's led us to Liverpool University, who were on a farm looking at what we're doing. So we're amassing all this feedback, and it's really, really positive. So I'm on camera now, and there's a room full of people here. I do think JP is quite shy and humble. A small Irish company is doing some really interesting things in this space. And I'm really, really excited to be involved in the project for as long as they'll have me. No chances of getting fired yet. But I suppose that's it. You know, it's about supporting the gut microbiome in a way that it's all about the best format. When it comes to protocols then, it's 30 mils a day, starting at birth. Because if we think about the young gut being open, naive, you want to get the microbes in early. The time for feeding is 30 mils for 30 days. Some people are feeding on for longer, maybe in heifers, where they're looking at digestive performance. The beauty about me is I'm getting hoarse, and there's a really good website we've developed where we've accumulated all our research, all our kind of paperwork called calfhealthchampions.ie, and we finished it yesterday. So if you're sitting on the fence, I'd suggest going to that, have a look at the data, etc. on that. So really interesting product. I'm going to answer questions as well at the end, but I have to re-emphasize, I love these products, I love what we're doing, it's just a dream project for me, but it's still being good at the basics is the building foundation of calf health. Colostrum, feeding, hygiene, space, comfort, fresh air. So simple. But if you can apply those rules on calf rearing, it makes such a huge, huge difference. Water, stress, good stockmanship, they're the extra tools that are there. Now, I think Ursula from Cormac Tagging, another sponsor, is going to come up and have a few words. You going to come up, Ursula? Just as Ursula makes her way up there, it is about, always have this concept of being brilliant at the basics. But remember what I said about progress over perfection. It's small changes over time. And I'm always conscious of, sorry Ursula, I should call you up too early, is giving people advice. Or, you know, we sat in a calf shed with JFC 2 weeks ago in Cavan. It was amazing. It was like being in the Ferrari of calf sheds. And the last thing you want is people to go home and feel shit about what you're doing at home. Okay? everyone's doing a good job. It's about small changes over time. And if you apply that to your calf shed, your farm, and I promise you, your life, it'll make a huge difference. So on that note, Ursula.
Hello, Tommy.
Hello, Ursula.
Hi,
Ursula from Cormac Tagging. Many of you will know her, but will you give people a little bit of background? You have a few tips on tags, and some people might recognize her. Ursula said to me, don't say this again, but she said she gave the keynote speech in Dairy Women Ireland 10 days ago and got a standing ovation. She's a bit like, I think, all the companies in the room, likes what she does, takes serious pride in her company, loves Irish agriculture, and loves her customers. So over to you, Ursula.
Yeah. Thanks, Tommy. You
water.
promised you wouldn't mention it. Anyway, so just a little bit about me. Ursula Kelly, Cormac Tagging. I'm the managing director there, passionate about what I do. And I suppose one of the things I'm extremely proud of is I was the reason that every farmer in this room has a choice in where they buy their cattle tags. And so that was after a lengthy department battle, but we're really proud of that. And we offer all the tags from our base in Tuam. I suppose one of the things about our tags, it's one strip per animal, one applicator does both, and I suppose we've been in the market for the last 7 years. If you know anybody using our tags, we pride ourselves on our loss rates, free replacements, and our quality customer service. And I think that's hopefully come across to some of our existing customers who are in the room. So that's my sales pitch over. I suppose just in terms of tips coming into the season, being brilliant at the basics, but there is some tips around tagging too. In conjunction with JFC, and obviously many of you have invested in the calf feeders, the thing of the right ear comes up time and time again. So the tag, the electronic tag, must go on the right ear. What's the right ear? It's the right ear looking at the calf. So
again, Ursula, because I always get confused here now. This is the right ear.
Yeah.
Can everyone see the calf here? Not the other way. So
Not
if
the
I
other
was, which one is right here for you? He said this one. No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this, I have to cause more confusion. Right here, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Shut up now.
So, and that's the reason the JFC feeders, and take a long-term view on it. The feeder right ear, it can be done in the left ear, but it comes out of the factory at the right ear. So, but in terms of 9 times out of 10, lads buying calves want it on the right ear, and then take it on a step further, all the drafting gates that are going in around the country, 9 times out of 10, it's on the right ear. So I've just seen it too many times across farms, different lads tagging, and even within the one farm, them being on the wrong ear. And one of the things in terms of the tips, we have a reusable button that if you do make a mistake in February, I'm not saying that you do, it's a reusable button. So if you make a mistake in tagging, the most important thing, obviously, is that the calf gets fed. So to buy a couple of those reusable buttons, you can cut them off if you get the replacement tags. You can't get the replacement tag until after the calf is registered. So to get a couple of them, you can cut them off when you get the replacement tag, and on you go. And the other thing around that and the calves is, and this is why I have an envelope in my hand. So
it's not a brown envelope for me, no?
No, it's not a brown envelope for anyone here. The thing about BVD samples and DNA samples, and we hear it all the time in February, is about the amount of samples on the floor in Portlaoise, where they go through letter rollers and they get damaged. So I know some of you will have them collected by the co-op, some of them will put them in envelopes just like this one. So look, if I was calving 100 calves in springtime, I know I'd invest 20 cents in a couple of those padded envelopes and work away. This is what we are contracted to send out for the DNA. It's pink for the DNA tube if you're genotyping. But just to keep that in mind, I think it's a really simple one. And like if you have 15 samples going off from that, and then you have to order 15 retests from me, and then you have to send them off again. You have to gather the calves as well to do that. Other than that, I just want to say you'll get an order form in the bucket. And this goes across the suppliers. I can give you calf tags today in 5 days. Ask me the 10th of January, and you know you're all calving. The 15th of January, the 30th of January, and then you'll wonder why it's 2 weeks. We've 1.2 million calves born in 10 weeks in this country. Just be prepared. And I think that's
is it?
a really important
Okay,
part.
Ursula, you did say a few words before you went off stage. I'm going to pick up your tags here now. You did give a little speech, not more than a little speech. You gave some great wisdom, I believe, at the Dairy Women Ireland conference. I know you're a passionate woman in agriculture as well. So I can't leave you off the stage without saying a few words to people on the greater context of maybe lessons you've learned. You gave us a great bit of a tip and advice, and you weren't going to say it, and Declan O'Donnell said you have to say that, Ursula, about your own experiences with just tiredness and keeping yourself right. So have you any little bits of words of wisdom? We're going to go to questions in a minute, but I think I'd be ashamed to let you off the stage as a keynote speaker to not grab some wisdom off you. On the spot.
On the spot. Well, look, we've all heard Tommy talk about building a calf shed for you and the calf, and then taking the stress off the calf. And like, you're the most important asset on your farm, and the most important asset to your loved ones as well. And back in July, I had a near miss on a motorway, just out of tiredness, and lucky to be alive to tell the tale. And I just say to everyone, just mind your health, mind your mental health. If you're tired, don't do it, don't make a journey. That's when mistakes happen and farm accidents happen, and nobody wants to be in that boat. And like, there's too many people locked up with TB, there is stress, there's financial repayments, you're not milking. And I'm passionate about that piece, and I'm involved in Embrace Farm, that, look, don't make those mistakes. You know, it's
simple advice,
not worth
advice. Okay, Ursula, thank you very much.
He had to ask the woman in the room to give that advice. So
don't make this about the sexes now. Don't make this about the sexes. We're getting on very well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ursula.
Well, nobody left during the time.
Brilliant. Okay, I am going to finish up now, so just a final few thanks and words. Again, I looked at I'm supposed to be here promoting Precision Microbes. I forgot half the things to say. 30 mils a day, you start at birth. Talk to your own vet practices, true vets. Your the length of time for feeding, 30 mils for 30 days. If calves do get digestive upsets, top them up at 30 mils. A lot of people are putting in liquid dispensers to feed it through the feeder. Again, we're seeing less digestive upsets. Supporting that immune system in the gut is really key. Okay, thank you for your time. You've all been reasonably attentive, which is good. Incredibly good, well-behaved children there. Will you give me some notes so I can go home? Absolutely amazing. And it's just so good to see such a diverse audience here today. And I did mention about the quality of the product for the calf, but also the quality of the product that you produce. And none of us are perfect. Remember that progress over perfection note. So my final thanks are to Gurteen, John, the team here, for allowing us in. Particularly the Precision Microbes team, Introchem, our Irish distributors, who put a huge amount of work into this event today. And they lost the captain of their ship, their CEO, Pat O'Callaghan, in desperate circumstances only a couple of weeks ago. So I know he would have loved to have been out in these events. To the sponsors, huge thanks to FBD, JFC, and Cormac Tagging. I know they're all around the back of the room. Without them, these events wouldn't happen. There's a website, calfhealthchampions.ie. It's a new website. There's lots of information on. If you don't like the sound of my voice, don't go there. But generally, there's some really good tips on calf rearing. To Mike and Ethan as well, it's a pleasure to work with them. And to you for giving up your time. We're going to do some questions today as well. So this is my second big event. And I always learn about, this is my lesson of progress over perfection. I felt last week I was a bit like Ursula. I was going too fast, and I have to do this, and I have to do this. And I was driving down this morning, and Fairy Tale in New York came on, so I turned up the radio, and I started singing along with it. I said, I get to go down to Gurteen today. I get to work with great people. I get to talk to an audience in an industry that I'm very, very passionate about products that I'm really proud to work with. So I suppose it's a simple lesson. You have to do things, and you get to do things. And I think you get to do great work. So continued success to all of you. Stay safe and farm safely for the spring. I'll take some questions now, but that's it for me. And just one last thing. There's a bucket outside the door, and there's one for everyone in the audience. Thank you.